The continent of Africa is home to 54 unique and prosperous nations and more than 2,000 languages, but it is consistently misunderstood. The main misconceptions about Africa are that they lack innovation in organized societies. The legacy of conquest helped perpetuate the stereotypes of Africa. Disney, Karl Marx, and many colonists added to the spread of these misconceptions. Disney is a main contributor to the spreading of stereotypes about Africa. Disney has a far-reaching impact across the globe. Most children's first encounter with the world around them is through Disney films. Africa is misrepresented in a couple of Disney films. The first is Tarzan. The inspiration for this reboot was Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1912 novel, Tarzan of the Apes. Tarzan of the Apes was a very racist and inaccurate depiction of Africa. When Disney went to remake this novel into a film, their solution was to not include any Africans in the film. This played into the misconception that Africa did not become a real-world power until the Europeans arrived. This relates back to the legacy of conquest that is perpetuated, the idea that prior to the colonization of Africa, there are no innovations. An example of one of the African innovations would be the evidence found of iron smelting by the ancient Bantu. The Europeans justified their conquest by saying that they were helping and advancing the civilizations or lack of in Africa. The Lion King, another Disney film set in Africa, was also rich with inaccuracies. They were depicted as having a despotic government and a warlike culture. In The Lion King, the animals are controlled by the dictatorial King of the Savannah. The age grade system in West Africa had chiefs, but they possessed little control. Authority and power was spread throughout the civilization, a political structure that succeeded due to the social and economic circumstances in sub-Saharan Africa. Unlike the brutal political tactics that occurred in The Lion King, Africans lived in peace and cooperation. Rider Haggard's book, King Solomon's Mines, was based on Karl Marx's encounters in Africa. Karl Marx was a German geographer who discovered the walls of Great Zimbabwe. Because of his racism and belief that Africa lacked innovation, he thought that it was built by white people, specifically the Phoenicians. His findings were an example of perceiving history to glorify one's people's ancestors and beliefs. The place known as Great Zimbabwe was built between 1200 and 1400 CE. It was the capital of a prosperous and complex civilization. Karl Marx discovered the stone walls that stand up to 30 feet high, and contrary to his beliefs, the city was untouched by Europeans. King Solomon's Mines demonstrates the racism surrounding Africa. Haggard describes the superiority of the Europeans in relation to the African. He believed that the European scientific knowledge trumped the knowledge of the Africans. For more than 350 years, the transatlantic slave trade dehumanized, exploited, and enslaved at least 12 million Africans. The slave trade was cruel and brutal. Men, women, and children were ripped from their homes. In order to justify their actions, Europeans convinced themselves that Africans were uncivilized savages. The ideas of racial superiority and inferiority were used as justification for the enslavement of so many. Overall, the misconceptions about Africa are very inaccurate. When it comes down to it, Africa has a rich history and heritage that has withstood the test of time. The misconception that Africa lacks innovation and organized societies can be disproved by the plentiful advances in complex civilizations. The legacy of conquest perpetuated the stereotypes of Africa through racism.